Hello everybody, my name is Kat and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things horror. And today we are discussing Send Help, which is the latest film from horror master Sam Raimi. As I was going into this film, I was like, is this the first Sam Raimi directed film that I've seen since Drag Me to Hell? And I was like, that can't be right. Drag Me to Hell was like so many years ago now. And then I was looking at his filmography, and aside from a few television projects, the last two films that he directed were that weird Wizard of Oz movie with James Franco that I forgot even existed, and then one of the Doctor Strange films, which I also haven't seen. So, yes, in fact, Drag Me to Hell was the last Sam Raimi directed film that I've seen. So it's exciting, right? It's always exciting when a beloved horror director comes back with a new project. Is Send Help a return to form for Sam Raimi? Overall, I would say yes. I think it definitely has his specific style, his specific brand of humor to it. There are plenty of gory, gross out moments that have that very Raimi, campy B-movie feel to it. And it's a fun film. I had a lot of fun while watching the film. It is a very funny movie and it's being billed as a horror comedy. While overall I did enjoy the film, I don't know if I would necessarily categorize it as horror. For me, at least, there actually weren't that many horror elements in it. And I'll talk more about that and why I think that is later on. But let's start off with the positives of this movie. This is a film that stars Rachel McAdams, who works at this big company, one of these big, like, Fortune 500 type firms. She works in strategy and data analytics and is always trying to figure out ways to help the company save money. She's a very integral part of the company, and yet, as far as the company hierarchy goes, she still has a very low role on the totem pole. There's a sense that there's a lot of finance bros that she works with that have higher up positions than she does. I'm assuming just because they're dudes and they play golf. And then, as always happens, her boss's son ends up taking over the company, and all of her dreams of hopefully getting that promotion are squandered as soon as he comes onto the scene. And he agrees to take her on this company trip overseas. The plane ends up crashing, and then these two are stuck on the island together. Before I went to go see this, I heard this movie be described as Castaway meets Misery, and immediately I was like, I'm sold. And the idea of Rachel McAdams playing a crazy woman who's out for revenge of her douchebag boss, again, I was sold. And Rachel McAdams, I feel, is definitely the highlight of this movie. I mean, listen, as a millennial growing up, Rachel McAdams has always been queen, whether it's Mean Girls or The Notebook. She was also in Wes Craven's Red Eye, which I love a lot. I've always loved her as an actress. She's kind of one of those actresses where I'll see anything that she's in just because I enjoy her presence and the charisma that she brings on screen. And she is having so much fun in this movie. I mean, I think this is probably the most like wild woman we've ever seen her. Like, she's coming in, her hair's all crazy and messed up. She's getting blood and guts spewed on her, and she's just reveling in it. You can tell that she's having so much fun with this role and being able to really let loose here. She's definitely giving this performance her all. Like, I definitely think she's elevating the script in a lot of ways. And it was just so fun to see her in this part, and it was fun to see her in a role in which she is stripped down a little bit. Obviously, she is a gorgeous woman, and I feel like anytime we see her in films, they're always highlighting that classic Hollywood beauty that she has. But it was fun here to see her take on a very different role and not be afraid to get messy and not be afraid to lean into some of the gross out humor that we have in this film. So she's great in the film, but we also have to give our flowers to Dylan O'Brien. Dylan O'Brien, I feel like another millennial favorite for anyone who was a fan of Teen Wolf growing up. But I will say I've been really impressed with him. He definitely seems to be taking the route of other teenage heartthrobs or young actors who maybe got their start in big fantasy projects like a Twilight or a Harry Potter. And then we see like these actors like the Robert Pattinsons or the Daniel Radcliffes that then go on to take more serious, kind of offbeat roles. And I feel like Dylan O'Brien is following that similar path. I've been very impressed with the projects that he has taken on in the last couple of years. I was lucky enough that the art house theater that I work at actually had a special screening of his film Twinless, which came out last year. It premiered at Sundance, and we had a special screening of it at our theater where he came and did a Q&A with the audience, which was very cool. Here's a picture that I took of him. Just have to take the moment to brag. I was in the same room as Dylan O'Brien. Yes, he is just as handsome in person as he is on screen, but I was very impressed by his performance in Twinless. It's a great film. I highly recommend. It's not horror, but still a good movie. And then same thing in this role. It's just fun to, again, see someone that is able to let loose a little bit, have fun with the material, not be afraid to get dirty and ugly on screen. And these two have such great chemistry together as well. They play off of each other very well. They're very playful. And it's just fun to see the ways that these characters try to outsmart each other. So yeah, if you're a millennial, I feel like you're really going to enjoy this film just because of the casting in it. Also, one of the finance douchebags at Rachel McAdams' company is played by Xavier Samuels, which is crazy because, again, for anyone that doesn't know, he was in one of the Twilight movies. And I was talking to a friend about those movies the other day for some reason. And I thought of him and I was like, yeah, whatever happened to that actor? And then he just like randomly pops up here. And he's definitely leaning into Patrick Bateman, American Psycho type character with his look, the slick back hair, the suit. I was loving it. And I feel like it's also very much leaning into that universal feeling that I think a lot of us have, especially around work and work culture, that feeling of I worked so hard, I got all the degrees I was told to get, and I did it, and I'm still stuck in the same like dead end position, and my boss kind of sucks, and my coworkers kind of suck. Not all of them, but definitely some of them. And so I like that it just leans into the fantasy of being able to escape all of that. I think for Rachel McAdams' character, you definitely get the sense that even though she is stranded on a desert island, she is thriving in this scenario. She's also a fan of Survivor, which I thought was really funny, and is trying to get a role on that show. And so when she is on the island, she's actually in a better position to be thriving because she knows how to survive in that type of environment. And I think that's also what makes this film a lot of fun, is just leaning into that fantasy and just being able to see a character who starts off at the beginning of the film really at a low point, and then being able to see them thrive and being able to taste a little bit of that power that they've been craving. And yeah, I mean, don't we all have that like fantasy? I was in a work meeting, not for my theater job because that's part-time, but for my other job, I was in a work meeting the other day and just left it having the feeling of like, what if I just like ran away out into the woods. I just lived off the land. I do not have any of the survival skills that Rachel McAdams' character has in this film, so if I did go out into the woods or an island, I would die immediately. But it's nice to watch films like this where you can just indulge in that fantasy. And as I said, there are some very fun gross out moments throughout the film. Again, that classic Sam Raimi type humor. There's like one particular moment with a boar and it's just blood and snot, and I was kind of gagging a little bit in the theater because it was so gross. I was like, ugh. So if that's what you're hoping for from a new Sam Raimi film, you definitely do have those moments in here. I wouldn't say it's a consistent gross out moment, and I don't think it's even consistently that outlandish or that B-movie-ish in the vein of something like an Evil Dead 2 or Drag Me to Hell. You do have to kind of wait for those set piece moments, but when they do happen, they are pretty glorious. And so I think that leads me back to my point that this isn't necessarily a horror film. Again, I'm kind of seeing it be talked about as Castaway meets Misery, and to a certain point, yes. But I feel like if it wanted to be more of a horror film, they could have leaned a little bit more into that misery aspect of it. I guess I kind of went into the film expecting Rachel McAdams to go full on Kathy Bates in the movie. And while she definitely has her crazy moments throughout, I wouldn't say it's quite at the same level as Kathy Bates in Misery. And if anything, I would say this feels more like a comedy thriller. But I think for me, what distinguishes the horror from the thriller is when you think of something like Misery, we were given enough of Annie Wilkes' psychology to understand her as a character, and we can even muster up a certain amount of empathy or at least sympathy for her up to a certain point. But she is still very much presented as the antagonist of that film. As viewers, we are very much meant to identify with James Caan's character. So in that movie, we have a very clear protagonist, antagonist. We're mostly siding with the protagonist in that film, and we definitely feel fear and danger that he feels throughout that movie. And I think that's where a lot of the horror comes into play. Again, there's a clear hero and a clear monster, whereas something like Send Help, I feel, yes, Dylan O'Brien's character is a douchebag, but I didn't think of him as a villain I didn't really think of him as an antagonist, nor did I really think of Rachel McAdams as a villain or an antagonist in the film. If anything, I feel like they end up on an equal playing field. I feel like we get to know enough about who they are and their backgrounds and their psychology that we can understand why they got to this particular moment that we see them in the film. And I feel like they both have good and bad qualities to them. We know that Rachel McAdams is a sad and lonely woman. And even when she does do things that are violent or horrific to other people, she also has moments of remorse, and she gets very sad and depressed about some of the actions that she chooses to take. And I feel like if anything, we are meant to identify more with her character. She is the one that we are introduced to first in the film. She's the one that we get more of these intimate moments with. And yeah, I mean, Dylan O'Brien, again, his biggest flaw in the movie is that he's a Nepo baby that grew up with rich parents who were not there for him. Again, I think the film is more interested in having this cat and mouse game between the two of them and seeing how they can outsmart each other. And it's more about who is going to outsmart who at the end, rather than a clear hero monster story. I guess for me, that's why it came off more as a thriller than a horror film. And again, I'm not saying that that's a negative thing at all, because I think the cat and mouse game between these two characters is definitely the biggest highlight of this film. Yeah, I think when the film was over, I had like two emotions at the same time, which was I had a lot of fun at this film, and I wish it had leaned a little bit more into that horror misery type vibe. Again, I think that was just because of my expectations of the movie going into it. My one genuine criticism of the film is it's pushing that 2-hour mark, and I feel like I could definitely feel that. I don't know if it needed to be quite as long as it was. If I were to take the script on its own, and the script is written by Mark Swift and Damian Shannon, who, looking at their past credits, has seemed to dabble in the horror genre. They seem connected to the Friday the 13th franchise and the Elm Street franchise. I think Damien was a writer or one of the writers for Freddy vs. Jason. If I were to take their script alone and think again about the story beats and the character development, I'd probably rate the story as a 6.5 that I think is then elevated by the performances and by Sam Raimi's directing. Overall, very fun film, a very enjoyable film. I think this is a really fun matinee. That being said, because I went to go see it at a 2 o'clock showing on a random weekday, and it was just like me and two other people in the theater, and while I did hear the other people laughing at various points, I think this would be a really fun movie to watch with a full house, just to get that audience reaction from the funny moments, but also the really gross out moments. If you saw Send Help this weekend, what did you think of the movie? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I actually did a double feature when I went to see this. I saw Send Help, and then I caught a screening of Iron Lung, which is the Markiplier horror film based off of horror game, limited release. The theater just happened to have a screening right after I got out of Send Help, and I was like, okay, well, I'm here. That was a trip. That was a whole experience that I will do a video on. I will give my thoughts on that film. Yeah, it was an experience. Not a bad one, but it's still something I'm like thinking over. I will be back soon with my Iron Lung review. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.